And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters 2020 for our unique podcast where we discuss the musical scene in 2020 with all its challenges and innovations. And artists have never faced the challenges and the amount of challenges and problems that we've had this year. But what I love about our podcast is we discuss, we bring on the artists in the community who are facing those problems head on and doing amazing work. Today, please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that icon, the bell icon, for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. Like us on Facebook, and please share our work on social media. We'd love to increase our audience and to bring more members in the community on as we have discussed these arts and all the challenges we face together. We have a great guest today. We have Mr. Ernest Green, J. Ernest Green, from Annapolis, Maryland, who is a distinguished conductor who's worked with the Washington National. He's worked with many different places. He's currently the artistic director of Live Arts Maryland and music director of the Annapolis Chamber Orchestra. In the past, he's been the cover conductor of the National Symphony Orchestra from 2001 to 2012, where he worked with many of the greatest artists on the stage, from opera to solo orchestral players. He's a distinguished Broadway and pops conductor and also opera, and a man who thrives on diversity. I'm delighted to welcome my friend, Ernest Green. Welcome, Ernie.
Thanks, Jason. It's great to see you. Good to be here Sunday night.
Well, it's a pleasure to. We've been talking about getting you on the show since I started the show, and one of the people I said I definitely want to talk to is Ernie Green, because Ernie has some of the. You have some of the most innovative ideas. You always do such delightful programs and challenging programs, and I'm always inspired talking to you. So I'm so thrilled that we can get together today.
Thank you. Well, the feeling is mutual. Some people would say inspired, some would say insane. I think there's a very fine line between inspiration and insanity, and I'm not sure which side of the line I'm on any given day.
I think it's two sides of the same coin with us artistic.
Exactly. It's exactly right.
You have to be a little crazy to go into this field in the first place, and this year confirms that for sure.
Man, this year it's like, this is where you hear your parents talking to you when you were a kid saying, you know what, you really ought to think about something a little more practical.
Yeah, nothing's been practical this year. We've been back and forth. I have multiple choral societies and different affiliations, just like you have a very varied musical palette, and that's one thing I love about your work is you do so many different things, a lot like similar to what I do as well, and
right,
you thrive on that
absolutely.
diversity, and
Right.
there aren't many of us who thrive in diversity in that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think early on, I sort of I had colleagues who really picked a lane, swam the lane, and that was it. I wanted to swim in the entire pool. And there are trade-offs with that, because there are certain things that happen in your career because you're doing a lot of things. And quite honestly, sometimes people don't quite know where to put you in terms of, where you should be in terms of hiring you, what kind of conductor you are, what kind of works you do. It can be a little tricky.
Certainly, and it's very easy, like when you do opera, to just do opera. That's your entire career. Just do symphonic works.
Right.
But boy, it's so interesting. Like I never get bored. I've always got a pile of different repertoire I want to do from every different genre, and that makes it more exciting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Absolutely. I mean, I really can't imagine sort of swimming down one lane. To me, that would just be. I think I would lose my mind, to be honest with you.
So let's go back in time. Tell us about the beginning of your artistic journey. How did you start in the music field, and tell us about how you developed into the artist you are today.
Well, so I actually was not one of these. I was not one of these kids that played. Still in high school, actually in coming out of elementary school through junior high school, as you may have figured out over the years, I'm one of these guys that sort of has a little ADD going on. And when I was in school, I had a teacher that said to my parents on the yearly or the 3 or 4 times a year visit that they would make to the class to figure out why I was not doing the work I was supposed to do and was drawing pictures and playing music and doing things. This one teacher said, I think he would benefit from um, working with going to this theater school. I think it would give him an outlet. And I went and I fell in love with it. I actually started out as a child actor along with playing the trombone. And I sort of, towards the end of high school, sort of moved into the music lane more firmly than the theater lane. I did my undergraduate as a brass player, as a trombonist. I studied with a lot of really wonderful trombone players in some of the big symphonies. Some of them are still playing in places like Chicago and New York and the Met Orchestra, places like that. And I had a fabulous teacher. But as I got to the end of my undergraduate, I really wanted to do things that I had more control over. I somehow was given the music director job with the summer stock theater company that was embedded in the music department in Toledo, and from there I took that and ran with it.
So theater
And
has
I
always been at
began.
the central of your music making. You've been in the theater a long time.
Yeah,
So
I think that's where I get my love of opera and musical theater. Somebody when I was at Peabody as a conductor. Well, so I went to Peabody. I auditioned. I got in. And I studied with Frederick Prausnitz and Edward Polachek, and later on worked with Robert Page and a number of other people. But during that time, one of the things that really hit me was this idea that I wanted to do. I didn't just want to get pegged as doing one thing. And when a lot of my colleagues were people would say, well, what's your dream job? And everybody would say, well, it's the Berlin Philharmonic or the New York Phil or the Chicago Symphony. I was like, yeah, I'd like I'd like to have, the Staatsoper in Vienna, or I'd like to, have I'd like to be at Chicago Lyric or the Met. I always sort of moved in the opera world. Although I wasn't a pianist and I wasn't really a singer. I did sing a bit, but I came at it from the outside in. So it's always been an interesting journey for me. And I discovered early on in my career at Peabody that I loved working with singers. I loved working with choruses. And that, when I started working with the Baltimore Symphony Chorus and Peabody Hopkins Chorus during that time with Ed Polachek, it was like an eye-opening experience, and I never looked back. And I couldn't get enough of working with singers. Just absolutely
yeah, that
couldn't get it.
connection with text is really attractive when you feel the direct emotional impact of that text to the music. It's really something special.
Yeah, agreed. And it's I love conducting orchestras. I love doing orchestral works. I love doing instrumental works. But there's something special about that, the sound of a human voice making music. It's incredible.
So in your travels, you're finishing up your degrees, and how did you land the dream job at the with the National Symphony? How did you get that appointment? And
Well, so this is one of these sort of object lessons. I always say to people, it's and with me in my career, it's the engagements that I've taken where there was virtually no money that have led to the biggest things. And this is a classic example. When I'd been in Annapolis for, I don't know, 15 years, something like that. And I got a call while I was doing an opera somewhere, and they from this person who I didn't know, but he was actually a friend of a friend. And they had a conductor that had to back out of a concert with this little chamber orchestra in Falls Church, Virginia. And he said, Bill said you would be a great guy to do it, and to tell him that you should come and do this concert with us. And I said, well, and I think they paid something. It was like horrible. I mean, it was like, I don't know, $200 or something. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is like that's not even gas to get there. I said, you know what? I'm just going to come and do this, and don't worry about the money. I'll just come and do this. We'll get the concert going. And what I didn't know at the time is there were a number of players who were in. This was a consortium of players. It was a player-run orchestra, and a number of the players in there were at the National Symphony, and they went and told the artistic administrator at the NSO that I was somebody they should look at hiring. And about a month or two later, I get this email from this person over at NSO who I'd never heard of, and he said, "Would you be willing to come over and work as a cover conductor for us and do some programs?" And I said, "Sure." And they said, "Well, good. Your first concert is with Stanislav Skorovačevský, and he's doing he's doing Bruckner 7, and
Wow.
yeah, and the next one was Kreitzberg and Shostakovich 6, and the next one was Jimmy Galway, and it was just like one thing after another, and it was because I did this little orchestra. It was a wonderful orchestra. They're not in business anymore, but they were terrific.
Isn't it amazing how sometimes those concerts that we don't think when we first take that job, how one thing leads to the other, and all of a sudden the pieces fall together and it turns into something magical.
Oh, it absolutely it is, and I will tell you across the board. Like this is sort of me. If somebody calls and says, "Can you do this?" If I've got the date free, I never say no. I mean, I just don't say no. Maybe I should, but I don't. And if somebody says, "Can you come do this?" and it's a chance to make music, I'll be there, man. I mean, I'll be there in a minute.
And these days, isn't that the truth? I mean, these days, I think about, I'm used to doing 15 rehearsals a week or concerts and mixed in there and running around like a lunatic. And now I'm like, I would give my eye teeth to do one single rehearsal with any of the choruses I work with, or orchestras or opera companies. I just miss the contact with people.
Yeah, it's really a difficult time right now, and I think the singers are. The singers in particular, we just had a first rehearsal with 4 players in the consort from the Bach Plus consort, and they just to be together and play. It's the first time they've done anything like this really in 8 months, and we're getting ready for a recording this week, but even 4 people sitting spaced out. It meant a lot to them. It really did.
We had a similar experience at Ocean Grove this summer. We were able to have the quartet recitals that we have every season, but we only had the audience of 100 were allowed in the great auditorium. So we had it was just this massive place of 6,000 seats with 100 people in them. But we broadcast them all. But the singers, we recorded the first couple. We had to record a few things in January, and I sat in the auditorium and listened to them just sing. I was started crying because I hadn't heard live singing since March, and it was so emotional just to hear it again and to feel it. And
yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. And what you realize is what's been lost during this time, and I don't think it's lost forever. I really don't. I think our world will be changed forever. People. I'm always a little careful how I say this, but I don't believe that we're gonna. I don't believe that it's going to go back to quote normal or the way it was. We'll come back to making music and we'll come back to doing concerts, but it's going to be different. It's going to be a different experience, and that's okay. Because, if you think about it, a lot of our world, Jason, and you know this as well as anyone, because of the breadth of different types of things and the amount of work you do. I mean, our world was already shrinking. I mean, we had smaller audiences that were aging out, and a lot of what we were doing was not really resonating. So something needed to change anyway, and it was changing by little degrees. We'd make a little change here, we make a little change here. This COVID crisis has really forced our hand and has all of a sudden just whipsawed us into making changes that we were hoping would be incremental.
We've talked about this. You and I were talking about this over the summer, back and forth a couple times. And you're such a wise person in this field. You are one of the most enthusiastic and and musical people I know, you're always one of those people who's out there doing it. And I'm not
Thank you.
I'm not a defeatist either. I'm always up looking. We can do this. Let's just go out there and find a way, uh,
Yeah, we'll find a
new
way.
way.
Yeah.
And so let's
Yeah.
talk about some of the things you're doing. I know, at Live Arts Maryland's doing some really interesting projects, like the piece we saw at the beginning with the amazing drone footage
Right.
of the Dan Forrest Requiem. And
Right.
Dan Forrest was just on the show last week, and a great guy. I can't wait to tell him. I was just watching a choir perform in COVID era perform his piece.
Yeah, and Jason, it's interesting. That was a piece, we've done that piece twice on our series. And the first time we did it, actually, you and I had talked about it because I was conducting in Ocean Grove, and I said, "Hey, what do you know about this? Somebody just recommended this piece to me." And you said, "Oh, your chorus is going to love it." And we did it. And you were right. They did love it. And then we had so many requests, we did it again a season later. And it was a piece that as this lockdown quarantine sort of progressed, people asked about that piece and doing it. But what's really special, my son did the drone footage and did the camera work and did the video editing, along with another colleague of his, a guy named Gabe Petkaitis, and they both really they're recording and creating stuff for us all the time now. What's really cool about that is that actually is the latest generation of what we started doing in the spring. And what we did this time is we put everyone on monitors or on headphones, and you can't see it in the video, but we have when this crisis hit, we purchased a tremendous amount of pro audio gear, pro video gear, so that we could create content. And if we had to go into a hall like Maryland Hall or another place, we're not reliant on their gear. We can literally go in, bring our stuff in. All we need is power and internet, and we're
That's
up and
brilliant.
running.
I mean, it's we're in a visual society now. Everything is and
Yeah,
and if
yeah,
we can't have audiences, if we can't have large audiences gather because of challenges, health challenges, we have to find a way to get artistic product out.
right, right. And I think this is, we're sort of, last spring when this first started, there was a very inventive performance of the St. John Passion. I don't know if you saw it, but from the Thomaskirche in Leipzig, with one singer singing the whole thing. The St. John Passion, the Bach St. John Passion in Bach's church on Good Friday, and it was
That's the
unbelievable.
Rifkin. That's
It
the
was,
Rifkin book times 100 with one singer,
yeah,
not four, not
exactly,
one at a part,
exactly.
one
Yeah.
total.
But wait until you hear this. There was a schola in the back of the church singing they sang a Kunal motet at the beginning, and then they did one or two pieces in the middle. They streamed in choirs from all over the world singing the chorales. Now they edited it down a little bit, so they didn't do every single aria and every single thing, but they had this wonderful tenor who now I can't remember his name, um, and they did it with a single player playing harpsichord and organ, continual organ harpsichord, and a percussionist playing vibraphone, snare drum. I mean, all sorts of percussion instruments. It was sort of a performance art piece, but when they realized they needed to. They weren't going to be able to have their yearly audience for this. They found another way, and they did the same thing with a B minor mass down the street at the Nikolai Kirk. So if the people everywhere are finding solutions to this, and I think that's this. This is going to be a way forward for us. Creating content that we can push out.
How long did it take to produce that the piece that we played at the beginning, the beginning of the Forest Requiem for the Living?
The concept and talking it through, we sort of batted around. This is no exaggeration. We recorded on a Saturday. We generated about 138 individual tracks. They started mixing, and they pushed it up. They pushed up the rough mix to me on Wednesday, and they did some tweaking with the video, and it was released on Thursday. So Saturday, up Wednesday, Thursday, it was fast. And they're good. These guys work hard. They really do.
Well, it's great to see people out singing live. It looks great in your neck of the woods. I love Annapolis. It's my second. Whenever I go away, I usually go to Annapolis. I sneak out there and walk the streets, and I just love that space. And
You got to call me next time you're here. So, you know, we can sit in my backyard and have a socially distanced, I just cleaned out my bocce court. It's ready to
I saw
go.
that on Facebook.
A friend of mine said, "Yeah, I can just imagine you smoking a cigar and wearing a white hat, drinking grappa, and yelling at the kids." I'm like, you know what? Those days are coming.
Oh, I tell you, you gotta
Oh
find
my God.
satisfaction where you can these days, and
You got to do it.
it's affected us all in such a drastic ways. I've had on the show. I've had musical theater stars, opera stars. I've had conductors. I've had an interesting variety of different artists, and we're seeing some of the older generation of artists are retiring. I've heard that. One
Oh
third
yeah,
of the Met Orchestra members have moved out of New York. Some of them have left the business permanently. We're going to
yeah,
see a vast shift in the music industry, but
yeah.
what do you think is the next step as we start to rebuild and come back again?
I think I think finding creative ways to look at, first of all, the repertoire. I think the days of, for instance, in the opera world, the days of being able to take a project and to spend $250,000 or $300,000 on a production with a small A or big B level company in a place like Baltimore or Miami or someplace like that where it's a big city, but the audience for that is small, and there's no way they can even if they sell at 70%, they cannot even begin to recoup that money. So we need to be careful and we need to think about what we're doing, what's the cost, and here's the other thing: when we do it, how do we get people to engage with it? We can't. It's not going to be okay anymore when people are able to come back into the theaters to put up stuff that people are not going to engage with. So we have to figure. A friend of mine who was a phenomenal orchestra manager made this analogy. Um, and we've all known conductors and artists who they're doing something that's really just not going to people are not going to resonate with, and their comment is, well, I'm doing it because I want to do it. No, you can't do that. Those days are gone. They're done. you know you have to have a reason for doing something. And his analogy, which I think was beautiful, he said, the orchestra world, and he was referring to, but it's the same with opera and the other quote art genres. He said it's like this: somebody says to you, I just don't like spaghetti. I always laugh because he used spaghetti. I don't know why he decided spaghetti, but he said, Jason, I don't like spaghetti. You look at me and say, you don't like spaghetti? Listen, here's what we're going to do. You're going to come to my house. I'm going to make you spaghetti. And then when I'm done, I'm going to tell you why you should like it. That's what we do. We don't, and I think that's got to change.
Yeah, I think
I think it's got to
you
change.
you really opened my eyes when I worked with I came and I've got to work with and experience your Annapolis Chorale, which was such a great group of people, and many of them are
Oh,
on the
yeah.
chat feature talking. And thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, are
Yeah, I
they
got a
really?
whole bunch of people
I love
commenting.
it.
It's wonderful, and
I
I was
love it.
just amazed by the warm atmosphere you created with the Annapolis Chorale, and how you really vary the repertoire amazingly. You're one of the only conductors I know that mixes in Broadway, and in fact, I think I connected once upon a mattress when I
Yeah,
came
and
to
you were there
Annapolis.
during it's an ice storm,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
they only did one of the performances
Oh
because they
my
canceled because
God.
you got about 4 inches of snow, which is nothing where I'm from in New York. But
Yeah.
that
But
ground,
yeah,
everyone.
well,
I
in
was
Maryland,
walking around the streets. Everyone else was like,
yeah. In Maryland, you get three flakes in the air, cars drive into a ditch just to get ready for the
but it was
snow.
it
You know?
was great to see people engaging, to do classical music and then to mix it up with
Right.
the contemporary and the pop. I think that's it was really opened my
You know,
eyes.
years ago, I mean, thank you for that. And again, I don't know that I certainly don't feel like any visionary or anything like that. But to me, it was sort of when I started with the chorale, I mean, everybody did the same 40 pieces, you know.
Mozart
If you
Requiem,
had a
Verdi
civic,
Requiem, yeah. It's
the Fauré
or
Requiem,
if you have a
and you
big
did
budget,
this,
the
and
Verdi Requiem, yeah.
yeah, exactly, the Brahms Requiem, you know. I mean, it's just, and everybody did, you know, and that was it. So I started tweaking and looking for ways to vary it. And I remember one year, um, I actually, I sort of got myself in a bit of hot water, but I got out of it quickly because I programmed um, um, opera repertoire and I programmed scenes, full on scenes with people I was doing opera with elsewhere. And I had somebody say, well, you shouldn't be doing opera because the opera does the opera. And I'm like, well, you know what? This is a significant portion of the choral repertoire. And you know what? If you go to see an opera, there's a lot of choral singing in an opera, you know, unless it's an opera with no chorus. But the core, you know, so this is an important part. So we started doing that. We started looking at Broadway. And to me, it's the more we push that, how diverse programming can we get, the better the chorus sings. It makes them sharper to be able to have to do a pops in November, a classics, or pops in October, a classics in November, pops in December. You know, we just sort of alternate, and for them to do that, it makes them sharp. So I
You
like
you
that.
influenced me quite a bit, Ernie. When I was after I'd worked with you and talked to you a lot and just got to know you a bit, I started adding pops to my repertoire. And the last 2 years, I've done quite a few pops programs and put together
Oh, that's
concepts with
great.
movies. And I tell you, that's been a really valuable part, something new for me, and that I've really enjoyed.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. I've got a couple of cool pieces I'll share online or offline with you. I've got a couple of cool pops things that maybe we can collaborate
Well,
on,
it's
you
always
know?
fun to collaborate, and these days I
Yeah,
think collaboration is going to be such an important part of moving forward because every individual
me
organization is
too.
going to be hurting coming out of this. I have a feeling.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I think collaboration can take a lot of forms. Ballet companies and theater companies actually sort of figured this out decades ago. They would share a production. So I remember Cleveland Ballet when I was, and it would sort of had a joint program with San Jose Ballet, and so you do Cleveland, then at some point it became Cleveland San Jose, and it was a joint company. But they actually started by sharing productions. So if Cleveland Ballet was going to do Coppelia, they would do Coppelia this third week of October, and first and second week of November they'd be in San Jose doing the same thing. So they build the production. Um, each company is not shouldering the burden for that. And one of the things that I'm really trying to figure out ways to do, I actually I tried sharing productions in our region a few years ago with other choruses. Each time I did it, um, you know, it didn't really work out. I think people were a little protective of their own programs, and I certainly understand that. But I think that doing things like putting up a pops program and then sending the program up to you to New Jersey, or having you put a pops program and then we send it down here to Annapolis. I mean, we spend money once and we make money twice. And so that economic model works, and it also gives the singers and the soloists and the players, it gives everybody more work.
Which is going to
Um,
be so important as we move forward because I
oh
can't tell you
yeah.
how many of my artistic colleagues, a big part of my work these last 2 years has been orchestral contracting and putting together projects. People hire me to
Hmm.
conduct as well as to contract, to put together and soup to nuts put together projects. And
Wow.
I've gone from doing 20 of those a year to zero. And it's
Yeah.
devastating to
Yeah.
an entire 60 people players, and it's ripples
Yeah.
down the entire industry.
Yeah, it has. And you are incredibly you've always been incredibly creative about stitching things together, and the way that you do it. And as the example you just used, you contracted, you conducted, that really shows a level of inventiveness about. how are we going to make a living?
Well,
There
it's
are a lot of people that just don't
it's
do
funny
that.
how innovation comes from necessity often. And
Yeah,
when I was
absolutely.
at the New Jersey State Opera, and the budgets were good. We had $250,000 for a production for a full opera, more sometimes. And then all of a sudden, things started to contract and shrink. And I was trying to keep the boat
Yeah,
above water, and we would do it for $150,000. We would go to a smaller theater,
right,
use a reduction for the orchestra, use younger
right,
singers, but really great singers, maintaining the quality. And it was my job to maintain quality. I still had an orchestra contractor and a choir manager and all the bring in the professional staff. We ended up, it got less, so I said, okay, I'll be the orchestra contractor, I'll be the
right,
choral contractor.
right, right,
Nowadays, I've learned that I can take out the middleman and find value in everything and still produce artistic
right,
quality. And that's where
right,
that's the challenges we face as artistic directors and music directors, and trying to maintain quality, engaging with the art, and keeping the
right,
audience engaged. And that's been a real
right,
challenge over the last 3 years. But
right.
that's our job as
Yeah,
musicians.
exactly. And it is really about finding that route to artistic excellence first. Because if you don't do that, nothing else matters. You can make the budget work, you can make the numbers work, you can keep players going. If there's not a focus on artistic excellence, none of that stuff will matter
It's all
because you won't be in
superfluous. It's
business
all
very long.
superfluous. Our
Yeah.
primary mission's
At,
always music.
right. At some point, if you don't do that, at some point somebody's going to say, "Hey, the emperor has no clothes." And once that happens, that's it. You can do a lot of things, but if you compromise on the quality, um, and listen, that what you just described. I mean, we've all had shrinking budgets, expanding budgets. My budget for a number of years, when I look back on it a few years ago, was like an accordion. It went like this all the time, and one year I'd have money, and the next year I wouldn't. But I still, on the years when I had no money, I still had to produce a quality product. And really, our singers and the people who are sort of the bread and butter, the core of Live Arts Maryland. Those chorale singers, they really they step up all the time.
Well, without dedicated people who love the arts, there will be no arts.
That's exactly right. That is
Especially in
exactly right.
America, where we're not
You,
government subsidized. Our European colleagues have been able to weather the storm a little better in some ways because they're still getting their
yeah,
full salaries at the opera houses. And
yeah,
we've had a few of our singers from Europe on the show, and it's a little bit different right now. But they just shut the opera houses down again in Vienna, in Germany, and in
yeah.
Italy.
Yeah, it's scary. And we were able to pay small cancellation fees for the final concerts of the years to the players. I've been really focused on not furloughing anybody, not laying anybody off. So we have not stopped a payroll since this happened. But I'm telling you what, that it has it's hard. It's been really hard to do that. But to me, that to me is it's an act of faith. I mean, I want when it's time for people to come back, I want them to know that I believed that and valued what they do enough to say, you know what, it's going to be tough, but we're gonna find a way to um, to keep you whole somehow. I don't know how we're going to do it. And I mean, it's I had somebody at a meeting the other day say, well, um, how long do you think you're going to be able to do this? I said, we're going to do this until we're able to start doing things that bring in revenue from concerts. We're going to keep doing it. I mean, if we have to start selling the piano one month and selling something else the next month, we're going to keep doing
Yeah,
this.
I'm in the same
It's
boat.
important.
There's lots of projects I'm working on, and it's just shifted the priorities a bit. Everything's kind of,
Yeah.
okay, keep things alive. I'm producing a taped concert this week that's going to be aired, a couple of things like that. Things are just shifting. We have to be ready
Yeah.
to plan forward, be very cautious with the expenditures and with the projects we overtake. But yeah, there's got to be that really good leadership, and sounds like you have it under
Yeah.
control.
Well, no, I don't. I wouldn't go that far, my friend. I frequently feel like I'm driving a car down a mountain road in an ice storm. It's all fine and good until you end up, going over the edge into the Shenandoah River.
Yeah, it's been. I'd like to give a shout out to Amy Cofield, a wonderful soprano who's watching on the show. It's great to hear from you, Amy. She says she's in Florida.
Amy.
It's a small world, and I love who we always have such wonderful guests appear on the show who show up in the chat. So it's always awesome to see members of the performing arts community.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Tell Amy I said
She,
hi. Well,
you
actually, I
just
just
did,
did.
yeah.
I just did. I'm telling you, she is one of the finest. She really is. It's you just don't get much better than that. Or nicer. Really one of the nicest people you'll ever meet.
Speaking of
So,
nice people, tell me about you're the second. You're not. I don't know if you know this, but you're the second music director who's worked with Marvin Hamlish I've had on the show.
oh, oh, who was the first?
My friend Mike Berkowitz was on the show.
Oh yeah, okay,
I think Mike
yeah,
was before you. He's a couple of years
yeah.
older than the two of us. I assistant conducted him, and I booked the orchestra for a show he did last year, a Judy Garland tribute. And I never met him before, and I read his bio. I'm
Oh,
like, holy smokes, this guy's does some
yeah,
really cool
yeah,
stuff. But it's just a small world, I think, when we meet
yeah, yeah.
artists.
Yeah, it is. Well, Marvin was the best. I mean, he was. I've told this story, a number of times. When my mother died very suddenly 9 years ago, and I had gotten a call from a friend of Marvin and Terry's, and we were talking, and I hadn't responded because she sent me an email about something, and I hadn't responded. And I called her up, and I said, "Oh my God, Carol, I'm so sorry. My mother passed away last night, and I lost track, and let me figure out what's going on." I had a call from Marvin and Terry in 5 minutes or less.
Wow.
Marvin was ready to leave. He was ready to. He was. He was going out of the country, and he was going, I think, over to Italy. And I remember this. And he said, "Hey, babes, what do you need?" He said, "Are you okay? I'm so sorry." He said, "What can we do?" He said, "Can I come down and sit with you?" I'm like, "Marvin, you're supposed to be on a plane tonight. You can't. You can't." He said, "It doesn't matter." He said, "I'll come down." You know. And I said, "Look, that's real. It's so sweet, but go, and I'll see you when you come back." But to have him say, he was ready to just push his trip back to come down, just to sit, that's who he
How long
was.
did you work?
That
How long
really.
did you work with him, and how did you first make the connection? When
Oh,
did you first?
I worked with him at NSO, and the story is actually kind of funny. Um, it was my first year at NSO, and it was I'd been there. Let's say it was probably the end of my first year. So and I got a call. They said, we would you be interested or willing to do a pops? And they would talk about pops in sort of this. Would you mind? It was like a drug deal. Would would you do pops? Are you okay with this? They didn't know that I love pops. I mean, I'm like I love doing pops. And so I said, yeah, I'll totally do that. And they said, well, you don't have to. It's not. I said, no, 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 man, I'll totally do it. Well, they said, well, we need to tell you it's with Marvin Hamlish. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Shut up. Yeah. And so um, Marvin and I met, and I Marvin had been through, he'd had a bunch of different covers and different assistants on projects. And they called me. And so I went in and I met him in the dressing room, and we talked for a little bit, and we started talking, and we started talking more, and we started talking more. He said, "Hey, close the door." And we started talking more. And within 5 minutes, we were like laughing hysterically. And the people from the artistic department came in and said, "Is everything okay?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, it's great." you know, and from that moment on, um, we were fast friends. My kids grew up knowing Uncle Marvin. I mean, he was really and truly the best. He was one of a kind,
What a
you know.
fantastic artist, and what an amazing opportunity. How many
Oh,
years did you collaborate with him?
12, 11 or 12.
Uh,
It was a long time. Yeah, yeah, it was we were just before he died, we were getting ready to work on a couple of really awesome projects, and he had called me up to say, I'm so excited about this, but and he told me what was going to happen, and then he was in LA, and he passed out, and that was it. But it was a crazy time
Now,
for
you were
sure.
involved in some of the really important and international memorial concerts for Marvin Hamlish. Who were
Yeah.
some of the artists you worked with on those projects? I was amazed by reading about that.
Well, the first one, it was in September, I think it was, and it was not, so it's about a month, 7 weeks after Marvin's death. That one was sort of surreal. I always tell this story because uh, my day, my day started, it was at Juilliard, and my day started that day at 9 a.m. on stage at Juilliard, and I'm standing there with Mike Nichols, the great director who directed The Graduate, Birdcage. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of films and Broadway shows. I'm standing on stage with Mike Nichols and Liza Minnelli. And from there, it went to Chris Bodie, Aretha Franklin, Isaac Stern, or not Isaac Stern, Itzhak Perlman, Streisand. I mean, it was just, and to be on stage with Barbara Streisand and all these people, was really extraordinary. But um, and to work with Mike Nichols, who was really and truly one of the most brilliant stage directors I've ever seen. You know that people are famous for something like that, and then you stand with them and watch them make little teeny adjustments. Brian Darcy James, who's a friend of mine, was singing a song from Sweet Smell of Success, and Mike didn't want him to start at the beginning. He wanted him to start at the middle. And it's a line that says, "It's like he looked inside of me and he saw who I was, what I could be." And Brian sings that. He starts there. Brian, of course, had worked, all many months, often with Marvin, as did I. And of course, he started singing that, and it was this emotional moment that I'll never forget. Standing there, just all of us were sort of, in tears on the stage at Juilliard. So he was able to distill it in that way. But then there were other concerts with fabulous performers. I mean, again, Lucy Arnaz, Robert Klein, um, uh, uh, Clea Blackhurst. Let's see who else. Adina. I did two concerts with Adina Menzel. Maria Friedman from the West End. Just amazing people who we were all there. Kevin Cole. We were all there because we loved Marvin, and it was like being in a clubhouse. Marissa McGowan, who is was with Kelly O'Hara in Kiss Me Kate. I mean, just one great performer after another. Bernard Dodson, who actually is not far from you when he's across the canal in
Oh,
Asbury.
wow. It's a small world.
I just talked to Bernard. I just talked to Bernard, one of the most phenomenal singers out there. Bernard did some of these. We were all brought there because Terry, in the wake of Marvin's death, instead of sort of holding up, she opened her heart and opened her house and opened her, and brought us all together. And she really, made everybody come together. So it was pretty cool.
Do you have any other great Marvin Hamlish stories? Maybe something on the road, and people are loving
Oh,
these
I've got
stories. We're getting a lot of.
my favorite story. I've told this one before. There were a couple of them. One of them, there are two that I remember that were sort of funny. We were backstage at the Kennedy Center, and it was Marvin and I were in the dressing room. We were talking, and Leonard Slatkin, who was the music director at the time. Leonard comes in, and the three of us are talking, and then the associate conductor Emil comes in with his friend John Clanton, who was also conducting. John, or I think it was John, maybe. But so 8 o'clock comes by. They call the orchestra to the stage. I was conducting on that concert, and I usually the bit was Marvin would introduce me from the wings, and I'd go out and he'd sit at the piano, and that was always funny because sometimes he'd wait till I was stepping up onto the podium, and then he'd instead of sitting at the piano, he'd say, I'd like to tell you another story, and I'd have to get off, and he'd mess with me all the time like that. But we're all five sitting there, so there's five, and nobody is going to the stage door when they called for the conductor to the stage. And finally, somebody from the artistic department comes in, opens the door, and said, "Oh my God, there are five conductors in this room. One of you needs to get out there right now." It was like 8:10. We're already 5 minutes late at the curtain. Slatkin says, "Not me. I'm going to go up and watch." And the other Emil and John leave. And I said to Marvin, I said, "I'll see you backstage." He said, "Oh, no, you're coming on with me." I said, No. I come out in the middle of the first half." He said, No, you're coming out. And as we're walking out, he's telling the stage manager to put a chair between the first and second violins for me to sit on, so I could be there for. But the other one was when we were doing a concert. This was great. We were playing something, and he had the first time I'd done this piece with him. It said MH solo 32 bars or 36 bars, whatever it was. There was a little extension on it. The next time I did it, my score just said MH solo, and I said, "So how long is this going to, how many bars?" It doesn't say. He said, "You'll know." And I'm like, okay. So we're out there, and I'm conducting, and I get to the solo, and it's just a Marvin piano solo. And he starts playing, and it's in E flat, I think. And he's playing along, and then all of a sudden he modulates up to E. And the orchestra's got to come back in, and I'm looking, and I'm thinking, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And I sort of take the score, and I look on the other side, thinking maybe I missed something, maybe nope. He's just changed keys, And so I look at the concertmaster, who I know had perfect pitch, and I look, and I went E, and she said. And I started to get ready to give the orchestra some kind of hand signal to say, like, E up, or up a half step, or so. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I look over my left shoulder at Marvin at the piano. He's not looking at the piano. He's not looking at the audience. He's looking at me. He's looking at me, and he's got this big grin on his face, and he's just playing like this. And all of a sudden he goes, "Bing, digga, 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 digga," and puts it back in the original key.
Wow.
And he's looking at me like, "You see what I did there?" But it was just, that kind of stuff was always fun, because, you never knew. And he was so stinking good. I mean, he just, I worked with him for 12 years. I never saw him miss. Ever. I can't say that about everybody, but with him, he never missed.
True legend in the field.
Yeah, he really was.
Yeah, once those legends pass, it's those stories become even more valuable. We remember how lucky we were to be in those positions, right?
Yeah. It was. I remember really the fun things. I remember sneaking out of places to go get a piece of cheesecake or ice cream, and coming back, and people are backstage, wondering. Marvin and I are walking down. I'm walking in my dinner jacket. He's got his tailcoat. And we're going to get ice cream before a concert. It's like, so those were the days.
So tell me about, you told me before the show, we were offline, and we were talking about, you've taken a teaching, you're working as an artist in residence at college now. What's it like teaching younger people?
Well, it's great. So I've been teaching at Washington College on the Eastern Shore for 5 years. And I started off there. I went there, I was doing the chorus. I've sort of started a musical theater program there with my colleagues. And recently I got a promotion, so I'm now a visiting professor, which
Congratulations.
gives me, thank you, thank you. I sort of, I'm not sure, what I did to deserve it, but I just said thank you and said, I'm on it. But I have to tell you, first of all, the Washington College it's just a wonderful place. It's a wonderful campus. I've taught at other colleges and other universities. Um, it is what I love about this place is the sense of community and support that the students and the faculty have for each other is really extraordinary. And it's a beautiful place on the eastern shore of Maryland. You drive through fields and cornfields and past, there are geese. It's just the rural eastern shore of Maryland, and you come across a bridge into this beautiful historic town of Chestertown. Um, I really love working with these kids. I had forgotten. I'd stopped teaching for a long time, mainly because my schedule just it was too crazy. I think I stopped teaching in at least in by 2000 I wasn't teaching anymore because it was just I was constantly having to cancel classes because I was out of town, and I thought at some point I thought this is not the way to do this. You can't be an absentee landlord. And I went and did a concert out there, and they said, would you ever be interested in coming out here? I said, I think I really would. I don't know how much time I have, but I would love to try. And I got to tell you, I fell in love with the kids. I fell in love with my colleagues. I fell in love with the campus. I would love to tell you that there's something I don't think is wonderful about it, and but I really love it. I love watching those kids. I love it when their eyes pop
Isn't that an
open.
amazing part of the teaching process?
Yeah, exactly.
I took a
You know,
teaching job in 2011 at Seton Hall, and I was at the New Jersey State Opera, and I was very busy and active as a conductor. But I missed my teaching. I started my career as a high school teacher and did that for 5 or 6 years, and then transitioned into the
right,
conductor role. But I find now that my teaching is so much stronger. Now I'm full time at Seton Hall University, and I love it there, and it's been
yeah,
an incredible addition to my life because I get to have that impact on students. I get to bring them music they may not have heard before and watch them, especially opera. I
right,
brought a lot of opera there, and a lot of them have never even seen an opera before, and they're in productions, they're around professional singers,
right,
and I just find that amazing to introduce people to new things and to open their eyes to what's possible.
right. It's funny. We just when you see that moment where the light bulb goes off, it's really an extraordinary moment. And it's interesting. What I find, I feel the same way. I feel like um, my work outside of outside of teaching is better because I'm doing this. And my life is my musical life is still very eclectic. Last couple of years, I've started doing concerts with Paul Schaefer and Valerie Simpson, and so you're doing these pops concerts where they're sort of it's a rhythm or rock rhythm section in the middle of the orchestra. So it's not a jazz rhythm section. It's a straight up, these guys are straight up R&B rock players, and then you go back and you're with these kids and you realize that that's an important to make connection to make, because it keeps you grounded. And let's face it, when you're doing stuff where you're working with people who you've seen your entire life, and all of a sudden you're working with them, it can be easy to sort of get lost. This is where you realize this is what's important. Um,
So, Ernie,
you know.
with your increased teaching role, what advice do you have for young people just getting into the music field? What do you have to say to those people?
Oh boy, I wish you could have been. I wish had been at my house, or you met Larry
He's on the
Molinaro when you
broadcast
were
right now.
down.
He's
Is Larry
commenting in
here?
the chat.
Larry
Says, well,
is
he's a wonderful organist. Yeah.
Larry. Oh my God! Not only that, he is just he's with I don't know if he's still on, but I will tell you, I'm going to embarrass him. When Larry is there, Larry is always the smartest person in the room, period. And and I'm telling you, but Larry actually made a comment a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even longer than that. It was probably more like a couple of months ago, where he said that young people today, there are more ways of being a musician and having a music career today for young people than there were when we were coming up. There are many ways to do it. You don't even, and actually to 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 have a career in music, you don't have to be a music major. I mean, you really don't. But you need to be inquisitive, and you need to continue to try to discover little things about music that you might have missed, and find new ways to do it. But I think Larry really said it beautifully when, with the idea that there are other ways to make music and to make a career out of music than just the traditional way. When you and I were in school, there's one way. If you were gonna, be a brass player, you went this direction. And if you played an instrument in the orchestra, we all went to music school at a time when the only successful career was to have a gig in a symphony orchestra. That's just not the case anymore. If you stay in the orchestra world, you can play in all sorts of different orchestras. There are early music ensembles, Baroque ensembles, opera orchestras, symphony orchestras. There are all sorts of crossover groups. So there are so many. So I would say learn for young people. I'd say learn everything you can and just be like a sponge. Suck it up. Find out when people, Larry, I'm going to continue to embarrass him a little more. Larry is one of the most creative musicians, and he's always finding new ways of looking at works that are really very esoteric and hard to sort of decipher. And that is a gift. And, if you have an opportunity to hang out with somebody who's able to do that, do it. Hang out, watch them work, and learn, because we have lots of new ways to do this.
It's great to have those colleagues with the wonderful ideas and the intellect, and it fires us up as well. That's one of the things I miss the most, is seeing all my colleagues in productions and backstage, just cross-pollinating ideas and pitching ideas, and just seeing artistic collaboration flow. It's I think it's coming back, and it's a matter of just keep on looking for those opportunities. Very sage advice for young people. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, thank you. Listen, I think it's great. I think there are so many opportunities for young people. I really and truly do. I think it's I'm looking. I've got a student who was a music major at Washington College. She graduated, and she was a really wonderful student. She is now doing a master's in arts administration at Drexel. And she's now, because of the pandemic, she's back living with her family in outside of Savannah, I think. But she is working for me now part-time, doing our social media stuff. And so, here's this person who was a voice major. She graduated. She decided to go into arts management. Actually, it's very similar to what my wife did. My wife was a voice major, went into arts management, ended up as a nonprofit arts administrator and a fundraiser. So there are ways to do it that are not traditional.
I tell my students that it's not a sprint, not a marathon. It is a marathon, not a sprint. That what you think you're going to be doing, what you're actually going to be doing 10 years down the road, and making a career in music, is sometimes very different. And sometimes you have no idea where it's going to take you. Your yellow brick road is totally unique, and give yourself the strongest and the most, the most options possible. Learn, be a sponge, and it could take you anywhere.
Yeah, curiosity. I often tell I tell people this. When I was at Peabody, I was an orchestral conducting major, and I was the assistant, the orchestra assistant, which was sort of the big plum assistantship at the conservatory. And at one point, they came to me and they asked if I would take the choral assistantship. And I'm like, no, why would I do that? No. I'm not doing that. And it wasn't like I had to because I'd already, I signed the papers to, continue for my second or third year, or my second year with the orchestral assistantship, which was like, and they said, no, 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 we want you to do both. We want to split your time up a little bit because we really want you to do both. We need somebody that is a strong conductor in that choral position. And so I was the first person at Peabody to have have two assistantships concurrently. I did not want to do it. I didn't want to have to deal with the singers. I didn't want to have to put up with that. I was not happy about it. And I was kind of, I took it in the end because the stipend that I received was big enough that I could actually eat and pay rent at the same time.
A miracle for a musician sometimes.
Which, at that point, I mean, I was thinking, wow, man, I don't have to eat like, yogurt and ramen. I mean, something other than ramen was,
champions.
Breakfast of champions. It's like every musician has to have creative ways to make ramen. But so I took it grudgingly. And I remember this. I walked into the first rehearsal, and they got started. They introduced me, and I started rehearsing. And I was rehearsing the first movement of the Mozart Requiem. Yeah, I didn't even get that far. I just had the Requiem at the beginning. And the difference to me between hearing that live and controlling that sound, being able to shape it, I came out of that rehearsal, I fell in love instantly with choral music. And 2 weeks later, I was at the Baltimore Symphony working on one of the choruses for the St. Matthew. And it's like I was completely enraptured by singers. So, but I wouldn't have done that if I'd stayed in my orchestral lane because I was an orchestral player. I played trombone. I played double bass. I was not a good double bass player, by the way. I was kind of crappy. But if I had sort of said, no, this is the path I'm on, I would never have experienced that. And my life would have been so empty.
Well, Ernie, thank you so much for taking the time to join me here. I wanted to get you on the show for a long time. We finally made it happen, but it was totally worth the wait.
Oh my God, this was a blast.
We're gonna do this again sometime. You're welcome anytime. Let's have our conversations. Let's get together and over a couple pints, we'll start planning our next couple collaborations.
You got it. I'll come up. We'll go to that place in Asbury that we went.
You come up or I'm going to come down. Either way, it's a win-win.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it soon. We'll make it happen.
My blessings to your family as well.
To yours too. I cannot believe your kids are getting ready to go to college and graduating from college.
I don't feel old until my son, who's a senior in college, walks in my office, and I'm like, now I feel old. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, actually, I'm glad I'm wearing headphones tonight because these lights here actually make my hair look a little gray. It's actually not this color, but it's the lights. It's the lights.
Well, thank you, Ernie. We'll be in touch, and you have a great night.
You too. Thanks. Thanks, Jason. I'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining us on Music Matters 2020. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that bell for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. Our website has all of our past library of 62 episodes with some of the most interesting members of the performing arts community. That's www.jasontram, that's my name, Jason Tramm with 2 M's, .net. And we have our next guests are tomorrow. We're talking about opera in the digital age, and we have Stefanos Koroneos and his director for Fedora, which opens up this week on a stream platform with some of the most exciting singers in New York. And I hope you can join us for that. Music in the digital age. This is a company called Teatro Graticello who's doing incredible work. This is their third major digital project, and they had a large film crew, and should be very interesting. So thank you so much for joining us, and remember, keep music alive. Good night.